Gotta have a little fun.
I think it's gonna be full. Daniel, do you want them right here? Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna get it. This one? Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Today begins our fall seminar. Super excited for the Dare and Endure seminar that we had planned months ago, and we have our guest speakers, Mark and Mindy, both here. So he's sitting there a little bio. I'm just going to read that and then just tell you what I know. So he's been married to Mindy for 33 years. They have 3 daughters together, 2 sons-in-law. First grandchild on the way, due in March. I've been preaching for 30 years. Ministered at the Town Acres congregation in, how you pronounce that, Muncie, Indiana. Assistant director for Bear Valley International Schools. They have 70 schools in 31 countries, so that's pretty amazing. First time I got a chance to be acquainted with Mark was in preaching school in Memphis. This guy is a balanced man, which is what I really appreciated about him. He has a great heart, kind human being. He's a down-to-earth person. I can say the same about his work. So without further ado, I won't take up any more of his time.
What time do I need to be finished?
It's only at 9 o'clock or 10. But you'll get a
Okay.
single bell and then a double bell.
Sounds good. It is good to be here. My wife and I had a wonderful trip. We took our time. We left Friday and came out, of course, through Illinois and Iowa. And we stopped and saw the bridges of Madison County yesterday in Iowa and the Armana colonies. That's one thing, when I go to meetings by myself, get there, get to the hotel, turn on the television, and but when you bring your wife with you, it's a different dynamic altogether. So we saw things I would have never seen, and I'm glad we did. We had a good time, beautiful area. Appreciate you all where you put us up at the hotel. It's beautiful, wonderful accommodations. We've got that walking trail right out our back door. We've already been on it a couple times and had a great time both times. Glad to be here. I love this topic. I love what you're trying to do this week. If I understand it, what you're trying to do, and I hope that we do. My wife and I have wrote some lessons, chose some lessons that we think will go along with this. I just think about dare and endure. That's such an important topic for us to understand. It's such an important part of life, not only in our spiritual lives, but in every other facet of our lives. So I want to start this morning at the beginning. If we're going to dare and endure, then there's one thing that we're going to have to do. And again, this covers all aspects of life, but I'm talking about spiritually speaking. If we're going to dare and endure, there's one thing that holds Christians back, perhaps more than anything else. And I know that's a big statement. You can probably think of 1,000 other things that hold Christians back. But what's one of the main things that holds us back? Not only as a congregation, but I want to make us think about this individually, myself. This is for you and me. When I preach, I say this at Town Acres all the time, pretend like it's just you and me sitting in here. And I'm talking directly to you. If you don't leave here and think, was he talking to me today? Then I've not done my job. That's really what I want. I want us to feel like it's just you and me. This lesson is for you. These lessons are for you. They're not for the person beside you, behind you, in front of you. It's not for the people you wish were here. This is for us, for each of us to understand. And so we're going to start with overcoming one of the obstacles in our faith, and that is fear. Mindy's going to talk more about this tonight in her lesson to the ladies. I'm going to kind of introduce it here. But a favorite passage of many Christians, and you probably can quote it with me, Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's an awesome passage. That's a powerful passage. And people use this passage for all sorts of things. I can become rich. Well, why? Because I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. We can win this football game except for Alabama. Why? Because I can do all things through Christ which strengthens me. My team lost yesterday too, but we expected them to lose. I can move mountains. Why? Because I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Would it surprise you that Paul's not talking about any of those things when he writes that verse, inspired, of course, by the Holy Spirit? And not only is he not talking about these things, it has nothing to do with any of these things. In the context, Paul is talking about contentment. Listen to the context of the passage in Philippians, the preceding passages and the proceeding passages. He says, "Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased. I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." What's he talking about? Whatever situation I'm in, good, bad, dangerous, peaceful, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that's what he's talking about. And if you think about the person who wrote that, this is the same fella that had all those stripes laid on his back. Can you imagine what his back looked like? I don't know if he ever, when he was building tents, nobody else was around, took off his shirt in the heat of the day. Imagine what his back would have looked like. He's a man that suffered shipwreck, which is one of my greatest fears. Although I'll never be out far enough to that needs to be a fear, but it's still a fear. He was in the dark, in the depth of the sea at night. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I've learned to be content. Fear is the one thing that robs us of contentment. Always that something out there that I can't quite see. It's not a reality yet. It may never be a reality, but it keeps me from enjoying the gospel of peace. Now, fear isn't always a bad thing. If you're afraid to touch a hot stove, that's a good thing. As a matter of fact, that's a healthy fear. There's a lot of fears that are healthy. It's not always a bad thing. But the fear that we're going to study this morning in our Bible class is a fear that's condemned in the Bible. And it's a fear that holds so many Christians back. It holds so many congregations back from doing great things in the kingdom of God. And that's the type of fear that we're going to talk about. And it's the type of fear that's been condemned in the Scripture. So let's look at the first one. What type of fear are we talking about? Let's see if this thing's turned on. It's on. Oh, there's our lesson. What's the first one? Fearing the wrong thing. Fearing the wrong thing. We're going to look at those passages. So get your Bible. We're going to turn to these. Some scriptures I'll have on the screen in later lessons, but these I want us to look at together. I want you to be able to mark in your Bible. But before we read these passages, let me tell you a story. And I have an idea. It's a made-up story. And the reason I have an idea that it's a made-up story is because of the names. Frank and I'm a Thrasher. That sounds like made-up names, don't it? I'm a Thrasher was the woman's name. Frank was her husband's name. Well, they were at the zoo together. Might have been the Omaha Zoo. I don't know. But they were at the zoo together, and Frank and Ima weren't getting along. As a matter of fact, he had done something that really made her mad, and it had been raining earlier that day. So Ima Thrasher had her umbrella with her, and Frank made her so mad that she begins chasing Frank all the way through the zoo with her umbrella, trying to hit him with it. Now, Ima was a little hefty, but she could still move for a big woman, and she was all over Frank and getting closer and closer and closer and just getting ready to wallop him on the head with her umbrella. And Frank notices something. He notices that the door to the lion's cage had been left ajar. And so Frank, trying to escape Ima Thrasher, throws open that lion's cage door, jumps in the lion's cage, slams the door behind him till it locks. And there's Ima trying to reach through to hit him with her umbrella. And he's, ha, 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 you can't get me today, Ima. And then he turns around, and what does he see? A whole pride of lions. Now, let me ask you something. We had probably all been afraid of Ima Thrasher. But what should he have been afraid of even more than Ima? those lions are now behind him and haven't eaten yet today and are getting ready to have their first meal. They're getting ready to have a potluck. It's lucky that he got there, and they're going to put him in the pot and they're going to eat him. You see, he feared the wrong thing. It's okay for him to be intimidated by his wife, but facing her would be a lot better, and her umbrella, than facing the lions that are now getting ready to attack him. The problem is he feared the wrong thing over the other thing. It wouldn't have been good to face his wife, but it's definitely worse to be facing the lions. So let's go to Numbers 13, and I want us to read about God's people. Have you ever noticed, and you'll see this as we go through this series this week, how much of the Bible is taken up by reminding us of God's people, the good and the bad. How they got through things, the things that they struggled with. They're examples. And why do you think that all of that is in there? Well, because it's for our learning. Romans chapter 15, verse 4. And so in Numbers chapter 13, if you're there, this is the time when God has led them out of the Egyptian slavery. Things have gone well for them. They've seen the Egyptians destroyed before them in the water, the Red Sea. And now, in Numbers chapter 13, starting with verse 27, they told him and said, we went to the land. This is where he sends out the 12 spies. You remember that? And they go out there, they see the land, and listen to what they said. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the banks of the Jordan. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature. There we saw the giants. The descendants of Anak came from giants, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. Then you go over to chapter 14, verses 1 through 3, and then we're reminded of something. So all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron and the whole congregation and said to them, and I watch this, if only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in the wilderness. Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? Do you remember what they left? How it was so bad that some extra biblical literature tells us that when some of the slaves were working on the temple of the sun god, the expectancy of a slave working on that project was 2 to 3 months. Now, I've sometimes worked hard. I've seen other people in some of these other countries that I visit, and I see how hard they work day in and day out. But they live for years, not 2 to 3 months. And then they said, if only we had died in Egypt, if only we had died in the wilderness, why have you brought us all this way, shown us all this land, all of its fruit, only for us to be killed by the enemies of God? Why have you done this to us? If only we had died. Maybe it's time that we return back to Egypt. But here's the problem. God said to take the land. God said, you're able to take the land. God had showed them time and time and time again, I'm with you. They've already crossed through the Red Sea on what? Dry ground. And they got to the other side, and what did they do when they got over there? They turned around, and what did they see? Their enemy swallowed up by the waters and die in their sight. They've already been complaining about being hungry. God gives them manna from heaven, bread. They just wake up, there it is. They go collect what they're going to eat that day. Then it dries up. On Friday, they collect twice as much because the next day is the Sabbath, and that food doesn't rot like all of the other food if you get too much, but except on that day, it stays good till the next day. They've seen all of these things, and now the one who has done all of these things tells them, you're able to take this land, and you're able to take this people. I'm going to give it to you as a possession. And now what are they wanting to do? Maybe it's time to go back. What's the problem? They were fearing the wrong thing. Rather than fearing God and His Word, they feared the enemy armies. And there's so many ways this manifests itself today. Leaders in the church who fail to deal with sin because they're concerned they might offend people. And so what happens is they just let sin go. Why? Well, we don't want to offend brother so-and-so. We don't want to offend sister so-and-so. So let's not do anything about it. Let's just see how it works. Who's always offended by sin? God is, isn't He? Are you more afraid of offending people who need correcting or the God of heaven? It also manifests itself in ways of leaders who fail properly to plan big. You know, oftentimes, and I can understand this because we're so trained in this, it's so ingrained in us, sometimes leaders will treat the Lord's money like it's their own. Now, I'm going to tell you something that's not going to shock you. I would love to have a huge balance in my bank account, personally. Wouldn't you? And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, what I do with it, there could be some things wrong with that, but I would love to wake up in the morning and have a huge balance in my bank account. And what's huge to me may not be huge to most, but it wouldn't take much to make it huge in my eyes. But I would love to wake up and do that. Why? Well, because someday I would like to retire. And as it looks right now, that day might be when I'm 120 years old. I'll be able to take a day off and relax a little bit. But right now, it's not looking so good. I wouldn't mind waking up and having that big bank account. We have to keep on saving. Have to keep on saving. Why? Because someday we want to retire. But when we think about it in the Lord's church, how many times do we have this same mentality? You know, I have to keep on saving for something that may never come in the Lord's church. There might be a leak in the roof someday. There might be some plumbing issues that we need to take care of. But you know, the Lord's money is different than my personal money in this way. The Lord's money is given to be used. Right? The Lord's money is given to be used. Whereas in our personal accounts, we like to have those huge numbers. In the Lord's treasury, we would like to see anything that's given to be able to be used for a good purpose. I'm not saying there's something wrong with keeping some in there just a little bit. Let me tell you, and I won't preach on this too much, but I'll try not to get on a soapbox. As you know, as Daniel mentioned, we have 70 schools in I think 31 countries now. And you know why we don't have 71 schools? Because we don't have the money. And I'm a believer there's enough money in the pockets of the Lord's people in our country today to where we could fund every good mission work that's out there. And there's enough money in the treasury of many congregations to whereas if every mission work was funded, we'd still have some left over. It's different. And that fear, something out there that may never come, we got to keep money for that. Let me ask you this. Who put the money in the account in the first place? The people did, right? The church did. with God's help. So, if I'm afraid of doing great things with the Lord's money, what am I really saying? Number one, I don't trust the people to put it back in there. And number two, I don't trust the Lord to help us do it. The brethren of the Lord put it there the first place. The brethren of the Lord will do it again. Why? Because the brethren are good people. And the Lord is a great God. That fear of something that's always out there that perhaps is never seen. The people should have been more concerned about what God thought about them, the Israelites, when they were crossing into the promised land. We need to be more concerned in trusting God and letting Him help us. Being afraid of the wrong thing. Another thing that gets us a lot in Christians, and if there were more young people here, this is really a good point for them. Tell it to your young people. Being concerned about what other people think. Being concerned about what other people think instead of what the Lord thinks of me. I have a sister. She's 4 years older. I'm a middle child, which will probably explain a lot. I've got an older sister, a younger brother. We're all 4 years apart. So I remember, when I was a kid, did y'all have Kmart's out here? Did you used to have Kmart? So did we. That was the coolest store in the world when I was a kid. That blue light special, did you ever chase it around the store? I thought that was the neatest thing, and I didn't care where the blue light went. I was interested in following. It could have been over the knitting section. I would have gone just to see what the deal was. I loved it when they went to the toy section, especially when I was a kid. But I loved Kmart when I was a young boy. My sister, who was 4 years older, she was just entering her teenage years. And I remember, it wasn't like it is today. If one parent went, you all went. Remember those days? Kids, we just didn't have the freedom to do whatever we wanted. So if they went to Kmart, guess who had to go with them? Us kids. And my sister, I remember this, and I don't know why. It's weird, the things that stick out in your mind from growing up, isn't it? That my mom said, hey, kids, you want to go to Kmart? My brother and I, who's 4 years younger, and I don't know how old I was at the time, yeah, let's go to Kmart. They had that, remember that cafeteria in the middle of the store? Mom was weak during those times. That frozen Cokes, we'd get one of those every single time we went to that place. So I was up for going to Kmart. And my sister said, no, I'm not going. My mom says, yes, you are going. I'm not going to leave you here by yourself. And your brothers are going. I'm going, so you're going. Dad was at work, wherever, I don't know. She goes, Mom, I can't go to Kmart. And it was just a big deal. Why can't you go to Kmart? And here's her words. What if someone sees me? I didn't understand it at all because Kmart was like Disneyland to me. I didn't understand it at all. Now, looking back, I understood she was concerned if one of her friends from school saw her at a lowly place like Kmart. And even then, with my lack of wisdom and lack of logic, I remember saying to her, but Donna, if they see you at Kmart, won't they be at Kmart too? She was afraid. Now, when I became a teenager, I got the same attitude. I had to be, cool on all of those things. But Kmart was always cool to me, but it wasn't to her. And you know what's made this even worse is social media. And I'm not going to get on that too much. Social media, I use it. I enjoy it. But most of social media is fake. I'm not talking about just the videos that are on there, but the things people post about themselves. And I do this as well because, I'm not going to get in there and post about, here's how I look when I get up in the morning. Here's the big buffet that I just ate, and I'm not going to exercise at all. I'm not going to put that. I'm going to put I walked 3 miles today. I've got my suit on. This is the new suit I've got. It's going to be everything good about me and never anything bad. Why? It's fake. There's a lot of bad about me that I don't post on there. I post the good. And so we need to understand what social media is. But when we get on there, if we get the attitude that I've got to let everybody think that I live this great life, I've got no problems, I've got no troubles, everything is perfect in my life, Why do I try to impress people so much? I want to look nice. I want to look presentable. All of these things. But what somebody else thinks of me, as long as I'm living right, does it really matter in the long run? Let me ask you this, though. Does it matter what God thinks of me? And here's the thing. I can't fool him like I can fool you. That's the thing right there. He's not fooled by Facebook. He's not fooled by Instagram. He's not fooled by TikTok. He knows me. Rather than having a fear of what other people are going to think about me, what's God think of me? And if God thinks well of me, then everything's great in my world. Fearing the wrong thing. Number 2, and they go quicker after this. Fear of danger of death. Now we're going to see somebody who has a fear. And you may be thinking, well, Mark, if you're saying all fear, remember what I said at the beginning, not all fear is wrong. We looked at a group of people that went to the wrong place with their fear. But when we are afraid, there's a right place to go. Look at 2 Chronicles chapter 20. We're going to get there in a minute. 2 Chronicles chapter 20. Many of us are always wondering, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? And that's a real question, isn't it? What's going to happen next in my life? Especially when we face some difficulties in life. And let me tell you something, we live long enough, we're going to face difficulties, aren't we? Some of you are going through some difficulties right now, aren't you? And so we ask, what's going to happen next? And that's not a bad question to ask. It's not a bad question to ask. Where do I go from here? What am I going to do now? Everything that I hoped for, worked for, that I loved is gone. What happens next? It's not a bad question to ask. Look at 2 Chronicles chapter 20. Now here's a king, King Jehoshaphat. He was about to be simultaneously attacked, all right, by the Moabites, the Ammonites, and the people from Mount Seir. So 3 different armies are going to come against his one army. And notice in verse 3, 2 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 3. And watch what it says. And Jehoshaphat feared. Let's stop and let me ask you a genuine question. Would you be afraid too? If you were the king, would you be afraid? I've got 3 armies. And you know what they did to kings there? They either captured them and held them as a trophy, or they took them out in public and oftentimes decapitated them and displayed their head for a victory sign. This is what we did to the king of Israel, so we're more powerful than them. And they did this because if we went to the next nation and took them, they'd take the king's head with them and said, listen, this is what happened to the king of Israel, who's more powerful than you. So, in other words, if you resist, this is what's going to happen to you, and what would the king do? Hey, wait a second. Can we talk about this? As a matter of fact, there needs to be no fight. Just come in and take our people, take our land, take our resources. I don't want to fight you. Would you be afraid if you were Jehoshaphat? I would too. Not a thing wrong with it. What's going to happen next? But watch what he does instead of the people of Israel who were afraid of what they saw in the promised land. 2 Chronicles chapter 20, and watch what he does. He feared and set himself to do what? What did he do? To seek the Lord. Where did he go with his fear? Where did he go? He went to the Lord with it, didn't he? To seek the Lord. And proclaimed a fast throughout all Judah. I'm going to seek the Lord, and here's what I want you to do, Judah. I want all of the rest of you to do the same thing. We're going to fast. We're going to pray about it. We're going to seek the Lord. So he sought the Lord. He proclaimed a fast. Watch verse 4. So Judah gathered together to ask help from the Lord, and from all the cities of Judah they came to seek the Lord. Gather the people, ask help from the Lord. Look at verse 5. Watch his prayer. Then Jehoshaphat stood in the assembly of Judah and Jerusalem in the house of the Lord before the new court and said, O Lord, God of our fathers, watch, are you not God in heaven? Do you not rule over the kingdoms of the nations, and in your hand is there not power and might so that no one is able to withstand you? Question, why do you think that he's praying this? Does God already know all of these things are true? Have you ever thought the power in praying something, not only telling God how great and awesome he is, but who also in the process of that prayer are you reminding how great and awesome God is? I'm reminding old Mark here, God is great, God is awesome, God is powerful, he can take care of my enemies, so that no one is able to withstand you. Are you not our God? Stop right there. Whose God are you? You're our God. You're my God, who drove out all the inhabitants. Now watch what he does. You are the great God. You drove out the inhabitants of this land before your people Israel and gave it to the descendants of Abraham, your friend, forever, and they dwell in it. And you built a sanctuary in it for your name, saying, if disaster comes upon us, sword, judgment, pestilence, famine, we will stand before this temple and in your presence, for your name is in this temple, and cry out to you in our affliction, and you will hear and save. What else is he doing? God, you're great and awesome. Telling God that he deserves the praise, but I'm also reminding myself about that. And then watch what he does. He goes back and listed some of God's great deeds. Did you not drive out all the inhabitants before? Did you not put your name in this place where when times came where we were in crisis, we could run to this building and cry out unto your name? You did all of this thing. Why do you think that helps? Has God been there for you in the past? And maybe even when nobody else was God there? You know, when fear comes, sometimes we forget what God has done. And what does remembering what God has done have to do with what's coming in our future that we're so concerned about? Because if God has been there before in our past, will he not be there for us in our future? He appealed to God as a friend to Abraham and to the covenant of God that God made with him. He appealed to God because they had built a temple. He appealed to God's promise to hear his people when they prayed toward his house. Look at verses 10 and 11. And now, here are the people of Ammon. This is who you are, God. This is what you have done. Now let me tell you what's about to happen. Moab and Mount Seir, whom you would not let Israel invade when they came out of the land of Egypt, but they turned from them and they did not destroy them. Here they are rewarding us by coming to throw us out of your possession, which you have given us to inherit. He reminded God that these very people who he forbade Israel to attack in the wilderness were now showing their gratitude by turning on them. But then watch verse 12. O our God, will you not judge them? For we have no power against this great multitude that is coming against us, nor do we know what to do, but our eyes are upon you. I love his honesty here, his humility. God, I don't know what to do. We have no hope without you. Our eyes are upon you. What do you do when you don't know what to do? That's a question right there, isn't it? What do you do when you don't know what to do? That's where Jehoshaphat is right now. You seek the Lord. You seek the Lord. The Psalms of David show him in frightening times. But what are the Psalms? His appeal to God, right? In fact, the Bible is filled with people of God who feared. Look at Hebrews chapter 11 and look at all the ones that were afraid. So then why are they in Hebrews chapter 11 if they were afraid? because of where they went with their fear. And then their trust and confidence in God not to let their fear freeze them and freeze their faith. They went on to do great things even though they were afraid. They trusted God. And then the last one. They feared the wrong thing, fear of danger or death, and then fear of missing out. Fear of missing out. When we moved, we preached 3 years. I preached 3 years in South Carolina. My family and I moved there. Our youngest daughter, Corinne, was just a little girl when we moved there. And you say things sometimes, you don't realize how much your kids listen to you. It seems like they don't listen to you when you need them to, but they always listen when you don't want them to. Well, this is one of those times. I was joking with Mindy. We were in the front seat. The 3 girls were in the back. And we had just moved into this neighborhood like 2 days prior to this. And we came home from worship on Sunday night. We were driving, and we didn't know anybody in our neighborhood. Not one person did we know. And I'm like making jokes, like to try to get a chuckle out of Mindy every once in a while. And we were pulled into our neighborhood, and there was a house there that had a bunch of cars. It was obvious they were having some get together, in that place. And I was just messing around, just talking to Mindy. I said, look, somebody's having a party and they didn't invite us. Well, they didn't know we existed, But I was just saying, how dare they have a party and not invite us, And then Corinne was in the back seat, who I had no idea was listening. She goes, why didn't they invite us? Why didn't they invite us? I want to go. We don't know these people from Adam. I want to go. And I said, well, honey, we can't go. We don't. Yeah, she goes, can't we just go up to the door and ask if we can come? And I said, no, we can't do it. We don't know these people. That would be crazy. And had to try to explain to her why we could not go to that party. What happened to her? There was a party, excitement was going on, and we weren't there to enjoy it. We were missing out on something. And she wanted us to go into these strangers' house just so we wouldn't miss out on whatever was going on the other side of that door. It was a fear of missing out. There's actually an acronym for this. And it sounds weird. Some of you may have heard it. It's called FOMO. You ever heard of that? And all it stands for is fear of missing out. Fear of missing out. It's a real thing. Fear of missing out. You want something, and you think about this. If you see something on Facebook or social media, there's a wedding and there's wedding pictures, and you kind of know this couple, and what do you think? I wonder why we weren't invited. I wonder why we weren't invited. Well, the truth is, I wouldn't have wanted to go if we had been invited, probably. But I wanted to be invited, You ever get something like that? That fear of missing out? This is a fear that weakens faith. This will be our last one. And I want you to think about this. Do you know what gets so many Christians to go back into the world? Is that fear of missing out. It looks like the world is having so much fun. Am I missing out on something? You ever see, I know you do if you watch any type of sporting activity, beer commercials? What do the people on beer commercials look like? They look great, don't they? What do they look like in real life? Don't answer that, that's mean. You see, the world feeds us something that it's all the fun is over here. And if you're over there, you're missing everything. You know what gets so many people, weakens their faith, lets them creep back into the world, is that fear of missing out. Let's close with Psalm 73. And here's a man. You see, this is why I love the Bible. One of the reasons I love the Bible. It's got evidence and just examples of everything. This is a psalm written by a man by the name of Asaph. And we won't read all of it, but there's so much good in here. Asaph is looking at the world, and he's looking at the wealthy prosper, the wicked are prospering, and here he is struggling. And he's wondering why, why am I the one struggling? And they're the ones that know what we're doing. Verse 13, surely I have cleansed my heart in vain, This is how he's feeling. I wash my hands in innocence. For all day long I have been plagued and chastened every morning. This is what it feels like. You've got those people out there, don't even acknowledge God. They're living what looks like their best life. Everything is joy. Everything is fun. And here I am trying to live a righteous life, and I still have problems. But then verse 17 and 18, Asaph gets this realization. I was feeling like this until I went into the sanctuary of God. Then I understood their end. Surely you set them in slippery places. You cast them down to destruction. Look at verses 24 through 26. You will guide me with your counsel, and afterward receive me to glory. Whom have I in heaven but you? And there is none upon earth that I desire besides you. Verse 26, my flesh and my heart fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. He learned something. As long as we're human, humans are going to have problems, both righteous and unrighteous. But the unrighteous problems are compounded and grow worse and worse and worse and worse. But what about the righteous? We can go to God with all of our problems, lay each problem down at His feet, right? And when the next problem comes, what can we do with that problem? Until I went to the sanctuary. Why is it so important for us to meet together on Sundays and midweek and every other opportunity that we have? Because, as we're going to see, especially in the next lesson, these are my people. We're all striving to do the same thing. And we are such the minority in that. I mean, not even that much of the world is trying to do what's right in the sight of God. You're not missing out on anything lasting. You're not missing out on anything that even lasts that joy until the next day when you go back into the world. But whereas as Christians, how long will our joy last? Till tomorrow? Yeah. Till next week? Yeah. Till we die? Yeah. For eternity? And man, preachers love to talk about eternity. And we ask this silly question sometimes. I've done it so many times and I catch myself and I still get angry at myself. When I ask the question at the end of a lesson, my friend, where will you spend eternity? That's a foolish question. How do you spend eternity? You see, we're thinking time. Eternity has no time. And that's how long my joy will last. Am I missing out on something the world has to offer? Psh. These three fears. When it comes to fearing man or fearing God, fear God and keep His commandments. When it comes to an uncertain future, God's been there for you before. He's going to be with you in the end. Trust. And be reminded, we're not missing anything by being out of the world, by being called out of the world. We have to dare and endure to keep on. And in order to do that, that means we can't let fear keep us down. We get to do something here in the next hour that is the best thing you'll do all week. And that is we get to worship God in spirit and in truth. Let's get our minds ready and our hearts ready to do just that. Thank you so much. Thank you, brother. Appreciate that.